Hello and welcome. A new edition of Inside the Show, where we speak each and every week with a college coach and we discuss their current season as well as their upcoming summer recruiting season that involves the Showball Showcase. And today I'm going to be joined by Showball Executive Head Administrator, lead sled dog, Bruce Larkin, as well as head coach at Brown University, Frank Holbrook. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks for having us, Walt.
Thanks for having us, Walt.
Frank, I know we're in mid-season, and it's a little tough to kind of think forward with regard to the upcoming summer, but we are in that time of year where parents, families, student athletes begin to dream and think college recruiting, obviously, where the showcases begin to fit in. I'd like to start off by obviously now about to wrap up your first full season at Brown University and about to hit the road with conventional timing for recruiting. When you're out at an event such as Showball and you're watching student athletes over that 2-day time period, where do you tend to focus a lot of your energy as far as, is it in the game setting or is it during the BP and skill set setting? What type of high school athletes are going to catch your eye at an event such as Showball?
Yeah, specifically at Showball, I think both days are really important, right? That first day of them showcasing their raw skills, right, with the defensive showcase, that pro style workout typically is what it looks like. You get a good feel for the raw skill set, right? Who's got bat speed, who can run, who looks athletic, whose actions play well defensively, see how they go about their business. You know, I feel like day one, it's like you start to mark down and going into day two, who you really want to lock in on. Obviously, I can speak specifically about our 2026 class. Out of the 10, students coming to campus here next fall, 3 of them were at Showball, right? I think one of them we saw for the first time at Showball, and then 2 others were guys that we had followed and then, saw compete and really tip the needle in terms of our recruiting process with them at Showball too. So I think both days are really important. I think you get new leads. There are some kids we didn't, that we recruited and didn't get to come to Brown that came from Showball as well. But I think both days are really important. I think skill set, you get to get a feel for the type of kids that you want to lock in on during the games, because ultimately you want to see them compete when things are on the line and things matter. So I think both days are equally as important.
And Frank, speaking of recruiting and both days being important, as a former college coach, can we talk about the process of when you identify a guy, what it's like, what you see that you like, and then the process to get across the finish line? Because we've all identified guys that we want and we get close, but we don't get across the finish line with them. Take us through that process of start to finish.
Yeah, when I get a family and a recruit on campus, I feel like you get in sell mode. You start talking about why Brown, why it's so great, Ivy League, the great educational experience, and then also, the baseball aspect of it and that great combination that's rare, right? You get into sell mode, and then at the end you say, all right, now we need to talk logistics, right? It's our timeline as a coaching staff. Being an Ivy League school, we have only so many slots we can use. There's academic requirements that we have to balance and be aware of, and each commitment always affects kind of the next one and that class in itself. So it's a very fluid process. So it's always then logistics of, hey, our timeline is XYZ. What's your timeline look like? What important decisions are? Is money a big factor? Obviously, there's no scholarships involved in the Ivy League. So if a family does qualify for financial aid, then there's that timeline that's added on top of both the player's timeline and our timeline, right? So I think it becomes very logistical based conversations after the hey, this is what we do. This is what separates us from the pack. Get them excited about Brown, but then also, take their puzzle and what's important to their decision and their timeline and then ours, and how can we match the two? And like you said, sometimes they don't match, right? Sometimes we need to wait 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. Sometimes we need to know in 3, 4 days, so it's not because we're trying to rush people into decisions. It's just at the end of the day, if we need a certain, like a catcher with a certain grade point average and an SAT score, and we're on 2 of them, and then, one person's timeline's pretty quick and the other's not as quick. Sometimes we have to speed up the other one, if they are option A, in order to cover our side of things. So it's a very fluid process. Last year, we definitely learned a lot about how quickly it can move, and when we were hired late in the summer. But at the end of the day, it's great opportunities for us and the students if it's a right fit. So,
one of the main topics of discussion for parents when it comes to the high-level academic schools, obviously Ivy League and Brown University fit that category. We talk about, in today's world, you don't want to rush your recruiting process. And for the Ivy Leagues or some of the Patriot Leagues, some of the higher level academics, you really want to wait until that completion of the junior year. Can you explain how that works with regard to, sometimes parents feel like, okay, I'm a 28 in this year's class. When are you going to make a decision? Well, you really need to see a junior transcript, a full transcript. Talk a little bit about that timeline and how it really rewards those that are patient and really taking care of business in and out of the classroom.
Yeah, obviously everyone knows the August 1st date being the day that we can contact that 2028 class this summer. And I think for us, for the powers that be in college baseball that have money and have scholarships and the academic requirements are a little more fluid, right? They're just making business decisions, right? How much is this kid worth? How much are we going to, and then they can move much faster. As you mentioned, that junior year transcript, we need it to be pretty complete, right? Because if you go after a kid August 1st heading into his junior year, you only have 2 or 4 years of their transcript. So when you're calculating their overall GPA and test scores, and some kids don't even have test scores then, you don't have a complete picture of what that average is going to be or how it's going to affect your whole class, right? So I always say I don't think we can commit too many kids before the summer, right when their junior year completes, maybe 2, 3, right? Because it's fluid in terms of their grade point average, their test scores, what their, numbers, punch out to, right? And then you can kind of shape the rest of the class based off of those 3 when you get their test scores. And so you can take some risks early, but you can't take too many, and you can't take too many kids because you really don't have a complete picture, right? And then there's the financial aid piece where, they want 2025 tax returns for the 2027 class. So it's almost impossible to get them a full financial aid picture. There's net price calculators, there's things of that sort. But if they want a hard number, between the hard number in financial aid and the hard number in grade point average and test score, it's just not there yet, right? So I think on our end, we're taking on a lot of risk. The kids that we do commit early, we're like, hey, you gotta keep on your grades, you gotta keep going, you're gonna make our class better the better you do, right? So those conversations are being had, but I wouldn't feel comfortable, if we have a class of 8 like we're gonna have this year, 8 or 9, I wouldn't feel comfortable committing too many kids, more than maybe 3 before the end of the high school season.
Awesome. I want to take us to campus. We're on campus, we're practicing and everything else. My favorite moment as a coach, I call it the aha moment, right? Where the kid figures it out. You've been preaching something to them, preaching, and it finally happens. And they look at you and say, Coach, I get it, right? What are some of those things that you preach at Brown that players can work on in high school to be ready to be recruited by Brown?
Yeah, I think the biggest transition from high school to college is just the overall physicality and the demand on the body and the mind, right, on a consistent basis, right? I think most kids in high school, they can get by a little bit on raw talent, raw ability. There may not be as many people competing for the things that you do well, but you get to college and you're one of 4 catchers, you're one of 3 or 4 middle infielders, you're grown men that have been through the program. We have a freshman starting at short right now, and he got sick during exam week a couple of weeks back. And as much as he's physical, like he looks the part, he's kind of ahead of the game in that sense. You still can't replicate what it takes to go through a season. So I think those student athletes and the ones that we recruit, it's like, hey, fun and games are over now. We got to see you getting in the weight room. We need to see some weight gains. You need to do this. You need to do that. We need you to hit the ground running next fall so that you can win a job and position yourself to play right away. And I think that's a big selling point for us is, the Ivy League in general, not being a transfer portal heavy, league. It's very rare that we're able to bring anyone in this league as a transfer. So you're relying, and part of our sell here at Brown is you got a chance to come in here and build something special with the new coaching staff and play early in your career. But if you want to do that and do that at a high level and not not fail, completely your first year. You got to come in ready to hit the ground running. So I think that physicality piece, I think you can preach it as much as you want. You say it all fall, you get on these guys. And then, like I said, you get back from a couple flights, a couple weeks down south, exams start heading your way. You get the, the little bug that's going around campus. Everyone comes back from spring break and spreads that thing around. And then boom, you're kicking yourself trying to get through a weekend. Right. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. And then, obviously the things that we preach within a program in terms of playing for each other, the selflessness that we're trying to create in this program is a big thing. And I think they're starting to see the reward of that. And I guess the power in that. So for me, that's been specifically to this team has been my most proud thing of this group here so far. So,
Frank, specifically as it relates to Showball and those 2 days, you get a lot of athletes that they show up, and this could be their first time. They look behind home plate or they look in the stands. They see all the coaches. They see all the technology everywhere, and they have access to and they tend to freeze up a little bit. They see that they can go talk to a coach. What's the best advice you can give to a student athlete directly with regard to the participation in the event? How can they prepare? But most importantly, how can they maximize those 2 days being in front of all of those coaches at a Showball event?
Yeah, I think, like you said, everyone has different backgrounds. You can tell the kids who have been to a couple events, they're polished, they're saying the right things to you, they're working all the angles. And then you have kids who are at their first event, they're nervous, they're underperforming because of the setting being new and things like that. I think the biggest thing is just being yourself, right, and slowing the game down. And as we talk to our guys about in big moments within our season, right, it's like it's the same pitch you make in the bullpen is going to give you the same shot in the game, and same thing in that swing in the cage and that rep you take a million times in the infield. It's just slowing the game down, playing at your pace, doing what you've, it's like going into a test that you've studied for. If you've studied for it, you're going to be calm, you're going to execute, the game's not going to speed up on you. So I think trust your training, trust what you do, understand that if you just execute and do what you do best, that it's going to give you your best chance, whether it's against your younger brother or Big Papi in the box. Like at the end of the day, if you execute your best pitch, that's the best chance you're going to get, right? So I think not giving too much credit to those staring at you, who you're competing against, and just trusting in the work that you've put in up to that point to show well. And if it doesn't go well, you learn from it, right? I think at the end of the day, you see kids at one Showball event that don't look good, but you see certain things about makeup and how they handle failure. And then you're like, hey, that's a kid that has some makeup that I want to go follow up on now, right? And so I think if it goes good or bad, how you handle it in both situations is just as important. And I think in this game, it's, I always say Father Time will tell in this game. Like over, there's so much failure, there's so much time, there's so much baseball to be played in your life moving forward, that if you can learn from the failures and then understand that, the success isn't always going to come easy, I think that's how you get the most out of yourself over the long term. So, put that in a vacuum at the Showball day and then live through it, as you move on and those phone calls come or don't come. So,
yeah, to reiterate that point, it is a game of failure, right? And coaches, I often used to say, if I was really interested in a kid, I already liked him before I got there. If I've seen him a couple of times, I actually want to see if he fails, right? Yep. And how he handles the failure, because he's going to strike out. He's going to hit into a double play. It's going to happen. How he reacts is huge for me when I coached. You mentioned earlier the transfer portal. Obviously, that's a big topic today. And within your league, talk about the transfer portal, how it affects the Ivy League. And as a student athlete that goes into the transfer portal, is there any possibility of getting into the transfer portal and then making it to an Ivy League school?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exacts of the 8 teams, how many are actually doing it. I know there are some that are, right? What the logistics are of that, I don't know. I can speak to Brown specifically. I think last year, the athletic department had 15 total transfers into the athletic department and Brown. Each sport's timeline is very different though, right? So the portal opens up for baseball June 1st. I could be wrong. Walter probably knows better than me, but June 1st, right? And then I think our deadline for just transfer application deadline is June 15th. So you're talking 14 days to do that. Now we all know that there's whatever people talk before June 1st, right? It's funny seeing kids tweet out in May, like I'm going in the portal and it's not even open, right? So, those things happen. So I think that time crunch and that time window is tough for us specifically. Now you get a soccer team here who's done in the fall, their portal opens up. They got 6 months or football or hoops, like that's a thing. So there is a path. It's a narrow window. It's, as people have reached out, people in the baseball community say, hey, I got a guy who's going in the portal. He's at a power four. He's not happy. My kind of stock answer is, hey, just have him apply before the deadline and hopefully he gets in and we'll talk then. We can support people, but it's the inner workings here, I have to negotiate within the athletic department. It'll affect my 26, 27, 28 class, right? So it's always kind of a value what's important, what works, and the reality of it. Like if I'm going to save a spot in my 27 class for a transfer, but we don't get him, he doesn't come in. Now I'm left holding the bag without that body, right? So it's just a decision to make on our end. This is our first summer going through this as a staff here at Brown with this as an on the table option, right? Because I got hired late last summer and everything was already pretty much wrapped up in terms of this aspect. So interesting to see how it plays out this summer. I'm working some angles on campus to see if we can maybe get one or two. We probably come up with 0 for all I know, right? But it's just trying to work every angle possible. There is a path. It's a windy and narrow one, but that's not going to discourage us from taking a peek down there.
Now, I want to ask specifically about Brown. You have camps now that are your camps that you're going to be conducting for the first time. Twofold question. When are the camps? And more importantly, give 2 pieces of advice to the athletes when they get the opportunity to ask, whether it's you or Pods, your assistant coaches, questions. What are 2 questions that they should have ready for you when they get that opportunity? And when are your camps that are coming up this year in 2026?
Yeah, we ran 4 last year. So 2 in the summer, 1 in the fall, and then a winter camp in our new indoor, which was awesome. All tailored to, the timing being different in terms of the class years. But, I think those are great opportunities. We'll have 2 this summer, 1 in June, 1 in August. So those are linked on if you go to our baseball page on our athletics website, just go to camps and I'll kind of funnel you there. But in terms of questions, I think what's important to them needs to be asked, right? If it's about how we do things, what we prioritize, whether it's the campus life, things like that, whatever's important to them. I feel like kids a lot of times ask questions to try and wow us, and
right.
We've talked to enough kids to kind of see through that. And it's like, is this kid genuine or is he just trying to, angle a little bit and politic me? But I like the genuine kind of off the cuff things that are important to them. That are important to their decision, right? I think at the end of the day, we want to get a feel for the type of kid we're getting, but they should want the same from us. Like this is a 2-way street. They're going to want, if they do commit here, this is a 4-year relationship where we're trying to get the most, not only out of the program, but out of the student athlete. So I think whatever's important to them, whether it's development, whether it's team culture, whether it's facilities, whether it's, spring trips, where we go, what type of competition do we play, summer baseball, internships, whatever's important to them, I think they need to make sure that they're getting all the information that's important to their decision.
My last question for you, Frank, is ultimately, if I'm a student athlete and I'm looking at all these different colleges, obviously Brown's in the Ivy League, great education, great coaching staff. Tell me what makes Brown extra special.
I think, we're not, they call it the HYP in the league, right? Harvard, Yale, Princeton. I think everyone wants to grab that bumper sticker. And, I joke with there's a freshman who has a 1590 on our team. And I feel like during pregame, whenever we go to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, he's like a little on edge because he didn't get in and didn't do his things, right? But at the end of the day, we're unique, right? We have to do things differently. It's an unbelievable city. I mean, if you come to Providence, between the food, just the balance between downtown and also the east side, which is more residential, it's a true campus setting. I think, you get to the quad, you get over to the athletics village. There's a ton of space. There's great facilities. I think when you talk about Brown baseball, it's an exciting time to be a part of it just because we got new blood in here. We're excited. I think administration's excited to get creative and how can we win, right? And I think for me, I'm lucky to have great assistant coaches with Coach Pavelski, Coach McKeon, Coach Marr, Coach Kellich, and just build something special. We're here to try and get this baseball program to the top of the league, right? And I think once we can provide some really good value on the baseball side of things, where you're continually in the playoffs, competing for Ivy League championships, getting to NCAA tournaments, moving guys on to professional baseball, but also getting one of the best degrees in the world, it's a rare combination, right? And so I think as a baseball coach and as a staff, the value's already here from an educational standpoint. Now we got to get the baseball to be at par with that, right? And I think once you get that special combination, it's a really good sell. We're about half hour from Boston, half hour from Newport, Rhode Island, beautiful down by the water. You got a great city here in Providence. The facilities from a baseball standpoint are exploding. We got a brand new 80-yard by 60-yard indoor turf facility that was just built for $80 million. Our turf field, brand new weight room. Our strength coach came from the Boston Red Sox. I think there's just so many things that you like what's going on here. I believe in the coaching staff here, the continuity piece. We're going to be here for a bit. Coach Podbelski was my college coach. He was who I worked for my first coaching job out of school. He was a head coach for 30 years. He's just here to grow something special here in his last, on his back nine. Coach McKeon's a Rhode Island guy. He's got a young baby like myself. He's my age, and I think we have a really good relationship in terms of building something special here. So this thing's going to take time, and obviously we've seen some success here early, but this is a tough league. It's not easy to have sustained success all the time. So just building up the program and the system is what's important to me. And I'm fired up to do it.
Yeah, if I am a parent or student athlete in academics, obviously great historic city in Providence, Rhode Island, Brown University, this is a school that's not only making noise this year in the Ivy League, but watch out if they get to a regional. They could do some damage in a regional where a team might not be aware of the changes that have occurred at Brown. But Frank, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you for joining us in season. Really looking forward to catching up with you this summer at all of the Showball events across the country, and really hope that you have continued success this year and beyond at Brown University.
Well, thank you both. I'm excited to get back out on the road this summer. Obviously want to finish the job here and have a great end of the season, but we were planning our recruiting calendar months ago, Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's all right. Let's look at the summer, who's going where, and Showball's all over that thing. So we're excited to keep it a part of our plan moving forward.
And Bruce, how can they sign up for the Showball camps all over the country? You can't miss it. California, New York, Chicago, Florida.
We're coming everywhere.
Boston, everywhere. So
everywhere.
Where should they go to sign up for the Showball camps?
Showballbaseball.com. You can go onto the website and hover around camps, and it'll populate all the camps that we do. Once you go to any individual camp that you like, click on it. It'll give you the list of coaches that will be attending. We're very proud of our list. We're very proud of having the head coaches there. We try to make it as efficient and for everybody involved, head coaches, players, parents, and everything else. Don't miss your opportunity to speak to Frank at all the events, and showballbaseball.com.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Frank. And next week on the show, we will be speaking with the Fordham head coach, as well as going to try and lock down Villanova as well for the upcoming show podcast. Thank you.